Hey, it's Rachel Cooke, your modern mentor. I'm the founder of Lead Above Noise, a firm specializing in activating workplaces, helping you discover ways to amplify performance and employee engagement together. We do leader boot camps, keynotes, and pulse checks. Just let us know what you need. Okay, by now you know I have a crush on this idea of activation. This finding and implementing of simple strategies to help our teams deliver great work, develop new skills, connect with team, purpose, and customer, and to thrive, to feel well and recognized and balanced. So when Edward, a senior leader in a professional service firm, called me a few months ago and asked for help with a, quote, 911 situation, I was pretty sure activation would find its way into the conversation. Spoiler, it did. Edward was feeling real concern for the reality at work. His teams seemed straight up overwhelmed. They were running around frantically, they were in and out of meetings, dropping balls, missing deadlines, arguing, and generally just failing to smile. Results, culture, it's all feeling bad right now. And I know our team leaders mean well, but they're too overwhelmed and frankly not really sure what to do, he told me. We've got to turn this ship around. So we came in and we ran an activation boot camp for a cohort of team leaders, and some kind of awesome things happened. If you or your organization is struggling with overwhelm, let's see if any of these outcomes have some intel to offer you in service of finding some relief. The boot camp begins with the basics. Leaders have to understand the 4 pillars of activation and why they matter, because these help formulate more meaningful questions and conversations with their teams. When we kicked off this boot camp, leaders were skeptical. Yeah, our teams are overwhelmed, they said, but we don't have any control over the volume of work and priorities being pushed down to us. And this is where I convinced them otherwise. Through our conversation together, these leaders devised a set of questions they asked their teams. They collected problem spots, opportunities big and small, and we turned insight into action and experiments and learning as we went. Here are a few of the challenges that we tackled and the actions they ended up taking. The first thing that came up, of course, was too many meetings. This is one of the most common complaints in so many workplaces these days. Employees are drowning in so many meetings they have no time to actually do the work being discussed in all the meetings. So yes, balls drop and smiles vanish. Now, while leaders may not be able to control how much work is being handed down to them from above, they did discover some changes they could make, and they did. And as a cohort, they agreed to do a few things. First, they agreed to define what constitutes a meeting. Leaders get more disciplined about what really needs to be a meeting. If it can be an email or a quick chat, it does not get a meeting slot. They agreed to prioritize objectives over agendas. Instead of people sending out a detailed agenda with a meeting, they started using meeting objectives. This helped to ensure that every meeting had a clear purpose and actionable outcomes. And if the objective is achieved 14 minutes into a 60-minute meeting, well, guess who gets 46 minutes back? And they agreed to refine participant lists by requiring the meeting organizer to be really intentional about whom they invited and for what purpose. It led to fewer of those invite everyone situations. Only one member of a team was typically required. The next challenge that arose was unclear priorities. Employees were saying, well, we're not sure what's most important. Everything feels urgent. And as they say, when everything is important, nothing is important. So what did leaders agree to do here? First, they agreed to doing some peer prioritization. These leaders realized that even without being able to control the inflow of priorities from above, they could certainly work together to better understand and agree to what most needed to happen immediately, what could be postponed for a beat, and what might be simplified so it required less time and attention to get to completion. And they agreed to a monthly cadence of meetups. This way, they would reconnect on a monthly basis and start to review their priorities time and again. This way, they didn't fall back into the same overwhelm. The next challenge that came up was inefficient processes and decision-making. When processes are slow and decision-making is bottlenecked, it impacts results, but it also creates a lot of frustration. So where could leaders help ease the burden here? Here are some choices they made together. First, They pushed down some decisions. They identified which choices they could delegate to their teams to avoid becoming bottlenecks. They agreed to do some real-time decision-making in meetings. So instead of having meetings and then needing to follow up for decisions later, they started inviting the decision makers into the meetings, getting it all done at once. And finally, they simplified some painful processes. They pinpointed the most painfully slow processes and invited their teams to suggest some simple ways to streamline them without adding risk into the system. And the fourth challenge they addressed was the lack of career development opportunities. It seems counterintuitive that overwhelmed employees would want to focus on career development, but it turned out that some of their overwhelm was kind of coming from boredom, a sense of, I'm doing the same thing over and over, but I'm getting nowhere. So the leaders responded with a few new ideas. They implemented a skill-building Friday program. Without budget or formal development for programs, leaders introduced these skill-building Fridays, where every other Friday, an employee would lead a training or a conversation on a particular topic of expertise. This gave the week's expert an opportunity to shine, while their peers were given the gift of a learning moment. And they implemented personal development plans. Each team member was invited to craft their own personal development plan. This gave leaders insight into what each employee was hoping to learn and achieve, while also making employees take some accountability for defining their own development journeys. A bit of a win-win. An activation bootcamp isn't just about quick fixes. It's about giving leaders the tools and strategies to infuse ease into the system. It's about creating accountability to ensure these changes stick. And it's about connecting leaders with their cohort peers and their teams, encouraging more regular and open dialogue. Change doesn't happen overnight. It's the small, consistent steps that make a difference over time. By listening to their teams and taking action, these leaders are creating a better, more sustainable work environment, one tweak at a time. Join me next week for another great episode. Until then, visit my website at leadabovenoise.com if your workplace could use an activation boost, a bootcamp, a keynote, a pulse check, you choose. You can find Modern Mentor on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Find and follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for listening and have a successful week. Modern Mentor is a quick and dirty tips podcast. It's audio engineered by Dan Firaband. Our director of podcasts is Brandon Getchis. Our podcast and advertising operations specialist is Morgan Christensen. Our digital operations specialist is Holly Hutchings. And our marketing and publicity associate is Davina Tomlin.